Hi everyone, Aiden here with etrailer. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Yakima RidgeBack and seeing how it fits on the back of our 2022 Lincoln Navigator. Now this is going to be a 4-bike hanging style bike rack. What that means is you're holding the bike by the frame up here and it hangs down below the rack. You've got 2 points of contact up top, holding that frame down into our cradles using the zip strips. Those just ratchet down over the frame and hold it in place. And then we've got a third point of contact on the side to limit our side-to-side movement. It's still going to be there somewhat, but it does do a good job at limiting it, especially compared to other hanging style racks that just use a stretchy rubber strap over the frame. These zip strips are much more secure. With a hanging style rack, we do want to keep in mind some limitations though. This isn't going to be the best fit for carbon frame bikes because with that fragile frame, we don't want to hang it by the frame. So that's pretty much a no-go. With alternative frame bikes and kids bikes, we're going to need to pick up a bike adapter bar to make sure that one, the bike hangs level in the case of those alternative frames, or in the case of kids bikes, to make sure it fits at all. With those smaller kids frames, they just don't fit over this dual arm design very well because of how far apart they're spaced. So generally, you're going to need an adapter bar for those cases. If you're using this for a family bike rack and you want something that's going to be more accommodating, my personal recommendation would be the Hollywood Rack's Destination. You can get that in a 4-bike variant, and it's going to be far more accommodating to kids bikes and alternative frames. Aside from that though, the other thing we want to keep in mind with the RidgeBack is going to be the weight capacity. In total, it can support 150 pounds, so just make sure that all our bikes loaded up are less than or equal to 150 pounds. You can also get this in a 5-bike variant that adds another set of cradles on the end. It'll stick out a little further and have the same weight capacity. Now getting the bike unloaded, we'll start with the zip strips, pinching the 2 tabs on the side and pulling those out completely and setting them to the side. You do want to keep an eye on those since they do just fully remove from the rack and make sure you don't lose them. Some people like to keep them in their car so no one can take them when you're not around. I will just put them back on the rack whenever I'm done so that we don't lose them down here in the shop. Now with a hanging style rack, it is a little bit more difficult to load because those arms are pretty high up. I'm a fairly tall person, and for me it's still a little bit of a lift. Luckily you're not loading any really heavy bikes on here, so it may not be that much of a concern, but it is something to keep in mind as you're going to this innermost cradle. You're gonna have to feed your bikes on there at this potentially uncomfortable height. Now it's like to replace these. And with them unloaded, we can actually take a look at the tilting feature. There's 2 levers on the bike rack. One in the front that's black and one on the top that's gray. We're going to focus on that black lever first, giving it a pull and releasing the whole rack down. Now we have to have bikes unloaded for this part because you can see how far it tilts. And with it tilted away, we get full access to the hatch of our vehicle. So if we need to get stuff out of the back, or we just need a place to sit down, change our shoes before or after our ride, we can do that. Just keep in mind that you can't do it with bikes loaded. Then returning this to its stored state, when you're lifting up, keep your fingers clear of the lever. It's going to snap back in place pretty aggressively, and it does potentially have a pinch point right there. Now I'm going to take this time to get some measurements. We're going to start off with our distance added to the back of the vehicle, going from the outermost point on the bumper to the end point on the rack. That's going to be right around 41 inches. It does add a considerable amount of length to the vehicle, but if we want to leave it in the hitch between rides and bikes are unloaded, we can fold the arms down using that gray lever on top. Again, keeping your hands clear of that lever as it snaps down, a little less aggressively on that one. That's going to reduce our distance added to only 13 inches. So it does make it a lot more condensed. If we do want to leave it in place between rides, it's a lot easier to fit into a parking space this way. I will say that with it like this, it's pretty much always going to be partially blocking your license plate, especially when you have bikes loaded. And then with the way your backup camera is in the dead center of the vehicle, the mast is always going to be blocking that backup camera, at least to some extent. So keep that in mind. It doesn't block your window visibility too bad, but it does obstruct it a little bit in the center. And then down at the bottom, we can check out the anti-rattle knob. This is going to be a tool-free way to tighten this up in the hitch and make sure that things are solid. You can see on the outside that it is lockable, so that can be our security measure to keep this in the hitch and no one can mess with it or loosen it whenever that's locked up. And then at the hitch, it's working with our 2" by 2" receiver tube with the included adapter sleeve. Without that, it'll work with 1¼ inch. So if you've got 2 vehicles you want to use it on, you can. And then it just has a standard pin in the side that's holding it in place that will always stay attached to the rack. Now with all this in mind, the RidgeBack is definitely one of the nicer hanging style racks. The levers on top make things really easy to tilt and fold and just use overall. And then the tool-free tightening method at the bottom is nice too. All that's just very user-friendly. Personally, hanging style racks are not my go-to. I think the Destination is a better option, especially if you're using it for kids' bikes, because it's going to be far more accommodating for those bikes. But whatever one you go with, I think it will be a nice fit on the Lincoln Navigator. Thanks for watching.
Here it is on our test course. We'll start by going through the slalom. This is going to show us the side-to-side action, which simulates turning corners or evasive maneuvers. Next, we're at the alternating speed bumps, which we'll see the twisting action. This will simulate hitting a curb or pothole or driving over uneven pavement. And finally, we have the full speed bumps, where we'll see the up and down action, which is just like driving out of a parking lot, garage, or driveway.